So have you ever really thought about how a superpower collapses? It's not usually some big Hollywood-style explosion. According to the source material for this explainer, there's actually a pattern, a predictable 7-stage sequence that it claims has already destroyed 3 major global superpowers. And the kicker? The argument is that the United States is following that exact same script right now. So yeah, let's break that down.
And we're not talking about ancient history here. Well, some of it is. We're talking about Imperial Spain, the British Empire, and of course, the Soviet Union. I mean, think about it. Each one was an untouchable giant in its day. And now, they're gone. The source we're looking at says this is absolutely not a coincidence. It's more like a historical blueprint for failure.
Okay, so the first thing we have to do is kind of reset how we think about what collapse even means. The big myth is that it's all about losing some huge war, right? But the reality, according to this pattern, is that it's an internal thing. It starts with economic exhaustion. It begins quietly in the spreadsheets, when the numbers just don't add up anymore, long before any army is ever defeated. So how does it start? Well, it all kicks off when an empire basically extends itself beyond its ability to pay the bills. It starts making promises it just can't keep. It's spending way more than it earns, it's producing way less than it consumes, and slowly but surely, those financial foundations start to crack. And when that happens, the trust that holds the whole system together, it just starts to erode. And this is where we get to the core of it. The source lays out these 7 very distinct stages that an empire goes through on its way down. You can think of it like a cascading failure, where each step makes the next one pretty much inevitable. So before we get to today, let's take a look at how this actually played out in history. All right, first up, Imperial Spain. They were really the first true global superpower. And according to this theory, they basically wrote the playbook. They provided the original template for this whole devastating pattern. So you have Spain, right? And they are fighting wars everywhere, all at the same time. I mean, from the Netherlands to the Americas, fighting the Ottomans, fighting the English. Just try to imagine the sheer scale of that cost. Half of the entire state's revenue was going to the military, and it still wasn't enough. That right there is stage 1, military overextension. So what do you do when you have to pay for a military you flat out can't afford? Well, you enter stage 2. You debase your currency. In Spain's case, they literally started mixing cheap copper into their pure silver coins. The coin looked the same, the face value was the same, but the real value? It just plummeted. And that, of course, kicked off massive inflation. Does any of that sound familiar? And the result of all that overspending and messing with the currency, that gets you to stage 3, a full-blown debt spiral. I mean, look at this. Spain declared state bankruptcy, basically defaulted on its national debt 4 separate times in just 40 years. It was a vicious cycle. They'd borrow, spend, default, promise they'd do better, and then boom, do it all over again. And this leads to a pretty wild irony, which is stage 4, the loss of productive capacity. Spain had all this gold and silver pouring in from the New World, right? But that incredible wealth actually ended up destroying them. Why would you bother growing food or making things at home when you can just import everything with all that silver? They essentially stopped producing, and in the process, they completely hollowed out their own economy. Okay, now let's fast forward a few hundred years, because the pattern doesn't just stop with Spain. It repeats, and with some really uncanny precision. 2 modern superpowers, Britain and the USSR, walked right into the very same traps. For the British Empire, the big catalyst was the 2 world wars. I mean, they were on the winning side, sure, but they absolutely bankrupted the empire to do it. They went from being the world's banker to being its biggest debtor. And the pound sterling, which had been the global reserve currency, the money everyone used for international trade, it collapsed. And the empire itself, it had to be given up piece by piece just to stay afloat. And then you have the Soviet Union, and their collapse was, if anything, even more stunning. They just spent themselves into oblivion trying to keep up with the US military. We're talking 15 to 20% of their entire GDP going to defense. It was a total house of cards. And when it finally gave way, the whole thing didn't just decline, it imploded. In less than 900 days, a superpower just vanished. And that brings us to today. The whole reason we're looking at this is because the source argues this isn't just a history lesson, it's a mirror. And what that mirror reflects, it claims, is a United States that is startlingly far along this exact same well-trodden path. Now, here's the really crucial point. The source isn't just saying the US could follow this path. It's saying the US has already completed 5 of the 7 stages. That's right, 5 out of 7 boxes are already checked. So this isn't a warning about some distant future. It's an assessment of right now. Let's look at the evidence presented. So, stage 1, military overextension, check. I mean, look at the numbers. The US maintains a global military footprint that just dwarfs anything Spain or Britain ever even dreamed of. Over 750 bases in more than 80 countries. That is an incredibly expensive posture to maintain year after year after year.
And how do you pay for all that and everything else? Well, the government goes into debt, and that leads you right into stage 2, currency debasement, which we just call money printing now, and stage 3, the debt spiral. And you really have to see this to believe it. The US is now on track to spend more money just paying the interest on its past debt than it spends on its entire massive defense budget. I mean, that is the textbook definition of an unmanageable debt spiral. How about stage 4, loss of productive capacity? Well, the argument is, just like Spain, America has shifted from being a country that makes things to a country that, well, consumes things. This huge, persistent trade deficit, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars a year, shows just how dependent the country is on importing way, way more than it exports. And that brings us to stage 5, social decay. The source points to some pretty clear markers here. You've got trust in major institutions at all-time lows, you've got rising crime and social problems, staggering numbers like over 100,000 drug overdose deaths a year, collapsing fertility rates, and total political dysfunction. These are all presented as signs that the internal fabric of the country is really starting to fray under all this economic strain. So, if the first 5 stages are already checked off, that brings us right to the precipice. And the source is very, very clear about what this historical pattern says has to come next, logically, mathematically. Stage 6 is the big one. This is the tipping point, the loss of the US dollar status as the world's reserve currency. I mean, this is the superpowers' ultimate privilege, right? But when the rest of the world stops needing your currency to do business, all those trillions of dollars that are held overseas, they have nowhere to go but to come flooding back home. And that's what can trigger massive, massive inflation. We already saw this exact thing happen to the British pound. And that leads directly to stage 7, sudden collapse. And history shows this part isn't some slow, graceful decline. No, just look at the Soviet Union. It's a sudden, brutal economic implosion. When the currency finally fails and the debt becomes impossible to manage, the whole system can just seize up. And it can happen with terrifying speed. And look, this really is the core thesis from the source material. The argument is that this pattern doesn't care about things like American exceptionalism or national pride. It's just mathematical. You simply cannot spend more than you produce forever. You can't devalue your currency over and over and expect no consequences. Once you've completed stages 1 through 5, the source claims you cannot avoid 6 and 7. The sequence is locked in. And one final, pretty chilling point the source makes is about acceleration. The argument is that we're not just walking down this path anymore, we are sprinting. That since 2020, every single one of these trends has sped up, and dramatically so. We're talking more debt, more money printing, more social division. The pace is just quickening. Which of course leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? Every single empire that has followed this pattern believed it was the exception to the rule. So is this time different? Is the United States truly capable of breaking this cycle? Or does history, and maybe even just simple math, suggest that the pattern is in fact unbreakable? That is definitely something to think about.